You got me all set? Yes. Thank you. So, we're here to, begin our discussions on 24-25 program component of our budget. I'm turning over to the superintendent for presentation.
Good evening, everyone. This evening, was originally slated to, review the program component budget and then the first, draft of our budget and take a look look at our draft numbers, where we are in terms of our, tax levy calculation as well in terms of what our maximum allowable tax levy is, what the numbers look like, and then have some conversation surrounding that. And I'm assuming from the large group in the room that a lot of people have received some of the communication that I sent out. We've tried to be very open with everybody about the conversations that we'll be having due to some, continued budget shortfall that kind of falls back to a few years in the making. We talked about this a little bit last year, and we've had some unexpected expenses that are adding on some inflationary costs as well. So we are projecting a budget shortfall that we need to address. We worked on the numbers quite a bit last week, and Karen McGregor, our business official, and myself reached out to Mrs. Dunnigan to really talk about moving up our meeting so that we have more time to have discussions about how to remediate our situation right now in the moment. And then we also are going to have conversations about sustainability for our programs in the district. So that we can, have some fiscally responsible plan in place so that we can, move forward and try to recover from the situation of 2 years of cuts and get back on track. So there will be some initial conversation tonight. There will, obviously, this is being recorded, so you can go back and refer to that and refer community members who were not able to be here so they can hear our discussions. We won't have a lot of answers tonight. We're really putting some things to the board for further discussion and consideration to kind of look at where we go next. We anticipate adding on at least one additional board workshop in the near future, probably, maybe working on this every other week. We will have discussions about this at our next board meeting. Typically, over the past few years, we've had budget workshops that were separate from our board meetings just to have our board and everyone prep for those robust conversations that can occur during budget season. But due to the circumstances, we will have some discussion points as well at our board meeting. So you're going to come to that and where we have public comment as well. And so you'll see the program budget presented a little differently because we are looking at some cuts that may bleed into the program budget. We're not going to go in detail as we normally would for all of the program budget numbers. We will give you some highlights, some of the challenges we see. We'll have some discussion with the board and then most likely present that at our board meeting if we do not have a workshop before that to further discuss kind of where we think we need to go to close our budget gap. So Mrs. McGregor will be going through our some of our drafts, share with the board where we're at. I'm just bringing up a few of my notes here. So originally our program, our goals were to include obviously what we think would create really meet the needs overall of our students and our programming needs in the district. And so that included a second nurse. Some of you know that we went through some challenges with our nurse situation, nurse sub situation. We're really on kind of the edge, I think, of, you know, in the winter, we get very busy, and so a second nurse was something that I spoke with the board about on a few occasions, and that was something that we wanted to consider in the budget to meet the needs of our students, but also to avoid the shortage of nurses and RNs and substitutes that sometimes we have been running into. We also have found that we are critically short in our transportation department. I really, and I don't know if we have any drivers that are here or anybody from that department, but really just a big shout out to them that I think the majority of our residents in the community have no idea about the critical shortage because they have worked so hard to meet all of the transportation needs that we have, but we are finding that it's becoming more difficult to do that to the point where we have our head mechanic, Mr. Wilbur, and our assistant head mechanic, Mr. Morrison, that we have, they're driving like 3/4 of the day. It's a critical situation already with our drivers, and we're also taking them away from some of their work, from some of the work. Then Mr. Wilbur also takes on some managerial supervisory duties, dispatching duties, and really looking at that we need to get some support for them so that when they are driving, that we are not affecting the efficiencies and the effectiveness of our transportation department. As many of you are here, are parents, and you know how critical it is. I mean, we need to get our children to school. We need to get them here on time. And so it's something that we have looked at and added someone who could take on some of those duties. So Mr. Wilbur can focus on the head mechanic duties and focus on helping to assist. This other person would also be a driver, an additional driver as well. So that's included in the budget. We have the need for additional classroom teaching assistant to support students in the classroom. We ideally were looking at, it's been something on our list for a few years to look at a part-time to a full-time elementary art teacher. So that is something that we talked about and wanted to add a full-time back in this year to really support special areas, maybe work. We've created a STEAM room, science, technology, engineering, arts, and what's the
You should have went now.
math teacher. This is at the end of the day. Yes, math. So, so really to kind of maybe do some classes in the STEAM room with all of our stuff that we've got through our ARP grant, additional costs to out of district programs. Just as we're seeing additional costs here, some of our providers that we work with, early Calvin Career Academy, that's through Adirondack, SUNY Adirondack, CLOSES programming, CTE, special program placements through BOCES, private placements, all of those have gone up in costs, and obviously we have changing needs in those areas. We've had health insurance increases. We budgeted for a 15% increase. And we're planning for, we were told last year that we would have a 6% increase, but our consortium has settled down and set us out for 17.25% increase in health insurance. So we've added that in. And obviously we have other inflationary costs, materials and supplies, additional costs for utilities, those types of things. So ideally in our first run, we're really putting all of those in there to really get a good picture of where we're at. So Mrs. McGregor is going to talk about really some of those components, maybe a little overlap of what we talked about. But I just want to help everyone understand where we started, that we really want to have a realistic, budget of really what we think we need. And so she's going to kind of talk us through and then add a little here and there and take us through where we're at, where our shortfall is, what some of our options are at this point.
Okay, good evening. So as you know, the program component, this is the largest component of our budget. This is where our students, teacher, and support services live. Some of the changes that we've made also impact our, it's as loud as I get, sorry. I don't have a teacher voice. Some of the changes that we made with the health insurance going up since we last met about the capital and the admin, that's gonna impact everything. What do we see?
Can the blower be turned off? No. Okay. I was just trying to make it okay. Well, I don't think anybody, can everybody back here hear me? It's okay. No, I just didn't know if the blower could be turned off, so it wasn't something that's on.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. Does the board have an objection to people coming from the far back to come
No.
along the side here? I mean, if you would like to come up along the side here, we don't know, on the. Yeah, why don't you just stand up and walk over?
You can roll.
And it's really, no, so I will tell you that, again, and certainly this is Debbie, you can change the format, but I mean, this is for the board and we are recording it and you can be here to listen while we're working, so. Well,
As loud as we can.
yeah, and I think this will probably turn off shortly.
No, you can unscrew it, we do it in our office. So as Adam said, the health insurance did increase from 15 to 17.25 for our HRA plan. The PPO plan went up to 14.25%. So I've adjusted all components of the budget to reflect those. The TRS we had budgeted at 10.25, that was a projected, but now it is 10.02, so that was a little bit of a decrease. We have 3 known retirements as of June 30th of this year. So at the initial look, the program component was $13,861,061, or an increase of $868,025. That's a 6.68% increase just of the program component before we've made any adjustments.
So that's including the health insurance increase at 17.25.
Correct.
The 2 PPOs.
Yep.
Is it including the retirements?
Yes.
So you backed out the retirements?
Correct.
So we do have the budget for,
And added to the
right,
people replaced.
originally we budgeted to replace those, at a lower step. Typically, we, find that people are coming in at a lower step than what they're going out at. So we do adjust for that. And we don't be called breakage, and that is already included in here.
Yeah, that's right.
So there are rules that don't need to be done?
Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that.
Yep.
So this is the first look at the revenue picture. This is with the governor's proposal. Our tax levy limit, the actual limit that we can go out at this year is 2.9%. That is our allowable factor, which gains us $143,000 on the levy. So we'll talk more about the levy later, but at least we are in the positive this year. All that said, our expenses are $18,575,814. That's an overall increase of 7.24%. But our revenue is only $17,792,814. That gives us a budget gap of $783,000. And that's when Ms. Adams chose to speak to the faculty when we had this large number to let you know, because of the increases in all the stuff she was talking about, adding to a art teacher and all the other situations, the health insurance. I can tell you right now, the health insurance alone was an increase of $330,000 to this budget. The overall program, district-wide. So that's a large number that wasn't anticipated. So that was our first look at our gap.
So I do want to point out when you look at the revenue, and this is important, so when you look at the proposed revenue column, when you go down to the bottom estimated local revenue, you're going to see that we have appropriated, we're, obviously anticipating and hoping for fund balance, beyond the allowable 4% fund balance that we have, to use somewhat as a contingency. Which generally runs about between 600,000 and 700,000, probably closer to 700,000 now, 750,000, based on our increasing budget number. But if you look, we're appropriating already just to help get this gap down to $783,000 from our general fund balance for this year to be used next year. And so,
That brings the balance from where to where?
so that's before, so if we did not appropriate that, we'd be at $1.4 million short. And in addition, we've appropriated reserves from our ERS, employees retirement system. Those are unrestricted reserves. And we can take out, about what we anticipate that we would use
We
to
only
pay
take
for
out
ERS.
what we anticipate we're gonna spend. If you can't over, you
Right.
take out 400,000 to help balance your budget if your bill is only 200,000.
Right, so we contribute to the employee retirement system on behalf of our employees.
Right.
And so we are allowed to take, we estimate that our bill will be about 255. Now typically, you would want to go back and replenish the reserves. We have not been replenishing the reserves. As you can see, last year, we did the same thing. For this current school year we're in now, 235,000 we use from ERS reserves, and over 600,000 from fund balance. So we're kind of getting into this cycle that is, it's not in a best practice, and if we continue, Karen and I have figured that we will deplete our reserves in probably 3 years, for the ERS reserves. So if we don't get back to replenishing them, but typically what you would do is if you have fund balance, we would then replenish this reserve at the end of the year with fund balance, but instead of replenishing some of the reserve or adding to a reserve, what we're doing is we're putting it to the next year's revenue. And so we're right there, that's just about $1 million that if we did not do that, we would be at $1.7 million. So after already appropriating a substantial amount of fund balance, which is probably about almost 4% of fund balance, we're still at a $783,000 deficit. And by law, we have to balance the budget.
Yeah.
Any questions on this page? So, I know there would be questions and we have to start talking about where we might be able to reduce. So, we did look for some money, in terms of what were our possibilities. And now, if you recall, we made a fair amount of cuts last year in terms of, instructional, cuts to our programming in terms of teachers, increase some of our section sizes. And so we're getting more limited and where we can reduce, our sections, our teaching positions. So we're having to now dig into some of what we wanted to do to enhance our support programming. So some of that we took out. So if we go through this, line here, the board will see we removed the second nurse. And when you look at these numbers, that not only includes projected salary that we had planned for, but also benefits that may be attributed to the position, whether, and also if there were retirement contributions that need to be made.
So we're choosing not to fill that role. Right?
Well, we're not choosing, that'll be up to the board, but that's my recommendation is not to do that. And you'll see that this short list that I'm giving you only gets about 382,000 of that 783.
Yep.
So not to fill a second nurse position. This is also something to carefully consider, but we have a small amount of money left in our ARP grant that was related to some of the grants that were available federally and statewide that we had opportunities for during COVID. Our last remaining funds have to be encumbered or captured by September. We had allocated a certain sum of money towards science curriculum. But what we could do is take $50,000 of it, estimated textbook costs and our summer professional developments. We're doing a lot of professional development around our new ELA and math programs. I know there's some people sitting in the audience that in the past have come to some of our meetings to talk about how they were concerned about some of our proficiency rates and scores. And so we've invested in curriculums, and we're trying to invest in our teachers and professional development. And a lot of that occurs during the summer because there's limited amount of time during the school year that we can do that. So between the summer professional development and textbooks, that would fall under allowable expenses in the ARP grant. We could maybe cut back on some of the additional curriculum that we wanted to purchase and put that in there. But I will tell you that next year we have to, the ARP is gone and we will have to return. So a lot of these textbooks are replenishables for ELA and math in terms of programming and resources and curriculum for our students.
Do we want to do that?
What?
Do we want to cut those?
We're not cutting them, but we're moving them to the ARP grant this year, so we're not cutting that. But we're taking them out of the general fund and we'll pay them through the grant. But next year, we're going to have to put roughly $100,000 back in. And remember, so 1% of the tax levy is about $50,000. So you're talking right there, that's kind of 2% right there, just in putting those back. So, you know, we're gonna see an increase in that in the program budget next year if we take those lines out. So just to bring that to your attention. So we're not gonna cut those out, we're just gonna pay for them differently.
Yeah.
2 elementary replacements. We have 2 elementary teachers that are retiring. And obviously, we put some of that quote breakage into the budget already. So, we can gain about, again, this is salary, benefits. We could gain 185,000 if we eliminate, if we don't replace those 2 teachers and we move and we eliminate AIS, math and reading. So that gets a little complicated with tenure and people in their different departments, but those teachers would either move back to the classroom or depending where they are in seniority, that will could result in a teacher cut if we look at other programming. Right now, these teachers could theoretically replace those 2 positions with no cuts. But as you can see, some of these other adjustments. So Karen, do you want to talk about those last few?
Sure. The BOCES adjustment is, I get numbers, we get estimated numbers and then we get hard numbers. And recently I've gotten hard numbers on what a lot of the BOCES numbers will be, our CTE program, our admin and capital portion of the BOCES that we pay for. And so that was a reduction. So I put that right in there and took out $7,929. And again, the benefits, like I told you, the TRF went down, so I made that adjustment and we got the rates on our workers' comp, and that went down a little bit. So that gained us another $5,914. And then I increased the fund balance to reduce the tax levy by another $25,000.
So that would be now to 725.
So now it's
Would be 725,000 that had a fund balance that we
Oh,
paid.
but, yeah, I was
From
just
the end
talking
of
about
this year.
that, but that's 375,000 now instead. So that total gain between what Ms. Adams talked about and I just talked about is $382,726. So your next pay.
Yeah, so that's if the board would choose to support some of those recommended cuts and changes. That would bring us to this new sheet here, where we still have a budget gap of 400,000.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So any questions about what we just, any other questions about what we just shared? So, this, one of the last pages, we have 2 things in here, but one of the last pages, there's some additional, I asked Karen to put together some thoughts. So this goes beyond the 400,000. None of them are what we really ideally would want to do, but we need to make further reductions. Because,
So these are potential chopping block items?
these are potential reductions.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna skip to the middle for a second where you see, so there are some, last year we did not really dip into the non-instructional positions. And, so I think, trying to, there's not much more we can get in terms of programming. So some of the discussion, I think, would be around, so if you look at, if we take the least senior clerical, the cost of that, and reconsolidate and reallocate work. So we can, you'll have a gain there of about 89,000. Cost of least senior custodian, 102. These again are with benefits, ERS contributions, FICA, workers' comp. We have to contribute all of these additional money. So, people, when you look at this, someone might say, oh, a clerical doesn't make 89,000. That is the cost of all their full salary and benefit package and what we have to contribute by law. Cost of least senior cleaner, you have there. So, and then we have, and I somehow don't have it on my right notes page, but, so when you get that 162, so then, and then the cost of additional teaching assistant, so I talked about that we have the need for an additional classroom teaching assistant. It's a possibility that we could, so just recently, over just this year was the first year that we added a teaching assistant to the library, which has been helpful with, Mrs. Fraunhofer's leave of absence that we've been able, that's been helpful, because we were not able to get a library substitute, but we, could take that the teaching assistant, we could reassign our teaching assistants that we have, take a TA out of the library, and put them in the classroom position. And so basically not fill that additional position that we wanted to create. That will gain, so those 4 items gain 311,000 and change. But we're still not at 400. And you can see now that we are at really looking back at programming cuts. So the first things, some people might ask or look at is pre-K is not mandatory. However, the UPK, we receive a UPK grant that funds, and so this year our UPK grant is $177,140. That was one of the reasons why coming into this year, we went from 2 sections of pre-K to 1. Because it was close to being fully funded. This is not, so again, I caution you, this is not the cost of the actual people in this room. This is the cost of the least senior people who, if you eliminated the program, seniority wise, would, it would be the reduction in those salaries. So, the gain, the actual cost savings to eliminate pre-K would be $22,333,000. I mean, $22,333, excuse me. And, I would say that we, I think there's a couple considerations. We foundationally have, there's a huge need for that. We don't have other pre-K options in the community. And, so I would make sure, that we really want to think about the gain. I'm not sure it's worth what that could do foundationally for kids. I don't, that's not my first go-to. So just so that you kind of see that, because we would have to give up, obviously, the grant. So the grant pays for all but 22,000. A few other things that could be on the table again. So we looked at class size numbers in elementary and, in terms of cohort or like the full grade level of full class. So we're running pretty much in all the grades, high 30s to low 40s. And so it's, to me, it's not, I don't think going to one section, and we could not, we don't have room for a larger class, and I don't recommend that. I just think it's just, logistically not possible. So we really need to look at other items. So cost of full day kindergarten. If we went to 2 half-day sections, again, I mean, I've had conversations with Mrs. Record and our kindergarten teachers, and this is not foundationally ideal. We know and understand that. There could be a reduction of, because you would have one teacher would do both sections of AM and a PM, that could be 94,000. That kind of gets us where we need to be. I'm not saying that's what we do. There are a few other things on here. And, I'm open to other, thoughts about this. I will also say this, we're discussing this to take it out of the general fund. We're working, a lot of times there are grant opportunities that can be available by the state. I mean, we have to qualify, we have to apply, we have to get them, and they're not guaranteed long-term, but usually for, 2 to 3 years, a lot of times, sometimes only 1, but a lot of them are 3 to 5 years. Replenishing a kindergarten and AIS and some of those, a lot of times will fit into a lot of the grants that we've been seeing. So, if this was something that the route we looked to go down, we would be working to try to find a grant to help restore this. But again, obviously, we have to get to the number for our budget in the general fund. Again, as the board knows, as the high school principal, I worked a lot with our special area teachers and really trying to hang our hat. I've been talking about this since I got here on our graduation pathways, increasing our CTE pathways and other options for our high school students to earn graduation credits and requirements without having to fit in that standard regents box of passing 5 regents. They can do 4+1 and take some CTE proficiency exams. Mrs. Maxwell has worked very hard to put 3 pathways together. We have a robust FFA. Mr. DeSoto is right now working on his pathway for technology. We want to be looking at our pathways. So it really pains me to have to bring up the, I think we have to show that we're looking at everything in this discussion. The cost of the ag program is $144,820. The cost of the tech program is $128,000. I don't, if this was a route you wanted to explore, it may not, be all or nothing. But on the other hand is a lot of the cost savings are in the benefit side. And what happens is that if someone's full-time, then they can contractually keep their benefits. So to go to a 0.8 or a 0.6 for the cost to our students. And, we've already eliminated the business program last year. I think that these are difficult to consider. I think they're all difficult to consider, to be honest with you, kindergarten, so.
Do you mind if we, I don't know if we touched in detail the building aid revenue, the change in revenue? That's something not, is that something you can teach me about?
No, it's a huge formula. I can't explain it to you tonight.
And how do you learn of this?
We get a printout of all of our aid.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
just give a little general overview.
yeah.
Yes,
How do we learn what we're getting? How do we anticipate what we're getting?
we don't anticipate, we wait till the governor gives us a proposal, which is what's out there right now. And it's based on not this current year, but a year before, based on our enrollment, our WADA. There's a whole foundation aid formula that I honestly can't explain to you because it's so convoluted.
Oh, and the governor has actually,
Changed it.
he has deviated from the the formulas that are in regulation right now. So we couldn't probably give you the calculation, but those are determined by the state.
And so you have no,
Those,
no foresight into what that number could be until,
They usually, if I were to just be starting the budget, I would probably give us like a 3% increase because you don't know. You have no idea. There's been years where they cut it. There was a whole years of the gap elimination where we lost a ton of money and that was back in the 2010, 2011 years. It was awful.
so it's going to swing. And it's,
It can swing drastically. It depends on who's sitting in that chair.
right.
So normally I'll wait. I won't even put out anything until I get the governor's first proposal.
And these are not even guaranteed.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
a done deal. This is a proposal.
And this is why you need to have a proper fund balance because you have swings.
Right.
Do we have any reason to believe that the governor could give us a lesser amount than what we're proposing?
I don't think so. I think a lot of the discussions and the advocacy and the lobbying
Yeah.
is to raise these numbers. I don't think we're in the position to see much gain if she does change the formula back. There has been some projection, the best, again, these formulas are very complicated that we were probably shorted in some of the calculation overall about 85,000, which would be helpful. But there are districts out there that are short $1 or $2 million right now that are looking at even more significant cuts than we are. So right now, this I think there's always a chance it could get less, but I don't think so. But I will tell you is that my worry is because as Sharon explained, this year, so next year is not. So there's Save Harmless, which basically is in legislation and that you would not receive less foundation aid, that foundation aid number on the top, than the year before, so then this year. But they use the formula base because this year's not done, right? They use the formula is actually based on last year's foundation aid, which right now we're about 6.7, but that was, I believe, around 5.9 million. So the calculation works off of that, which was helpful to us. But now we've been basically really close to fully funded now. And with our, we have, and actually I just got a new enrollment study from BOCES does one each year. I have not taken a look at it. Yeah, we just got it. And I'll share that with the board, but we're not rapidly declining, but we are seeing slight declines in our enrollment. We're not gaining enrollment. We're not gaining tax levy, not tax base, right? We're not getting a lot of new businesses, new construction. And so our ability to gain revenue is going to be limited to tax levy, and which is very small increments here, but at the same time, for each individual taxpayer, it's an impact. So we're in this spot, but I will tell you that if the governor is not held to the current regulation of Save Harmless, we could be in a worse situation in future years. And the New York State is already, kind of alluding to, it's not it's not put out there a lot, but if you listen carefully, they're alluding to financial concerns for next fiscal year. And so that could impact everybody the following year. And the governor is saying, if they do Save Harmless, that the most people are gonna get more money than they deserve enrollment wise, or than they qualify for. And what I'm hearing, so we work at BOCES, we work with an advocacy group through our BOCES Closer, and they come and give us reports each month, and it's not promising. And there's also discussion about changing the formula, which also would eliminate Save Harmless. So we could stand to benefit, but you always can stand to lose. So, it's important, right? Yeah, I mean, we don't want to be running down our fund balance, but at the same time, we really have no choice right now.
And at this point, again, this is just proposed, and as soon as we get the real numbers, if it changes.
Right.
We will.
You're gonna see this change by the final budget.
Just like the admin piece of the budget's already changed, just like the capital's already changed, and that's why everything's stamped draft, because These are just first looks.
And that's why we don't release them publicly, because this changed from yesterday.
The public's here.
Right,
It's fine,
but,
it's fine.
right, but this is very
This is
listening,
just-
to our discussions right now.
Changed, yeah.
And so that's why we present the final budget in May. And so what will happen is that these numbers will change. But they're also not hopeful for an on-time budget either. So the numbers aren't firm until the budget's passed by the legislature.
And that's why when we presented the capital and the admin, I was very specific. This is budgeting the health insurance at 15. We felt very comfortable at that. That's what we were told. But as soon as I learned that, no, we just got the printout today, it's 17.25, had to go back in and change it. That's a big impact.
The 2.25 is an increase of about how much?
But it said at the beginning, it's $330.
Just a 2.25 is an increase of $300,000. That's incredible.
$330,000.
Yeah.
The health insurance costs are significant.
Sticking in it, so.
Bears the expense of the majority of that.
Yeah, tremendously so. So as a whole, how much will our health insurance increase? You know, the 17.25%, how, as a cost, if you're to put a dollar to it, how much is it?
That's the $300,000.
That's the $300,000. That's the $300,000.
That's the increase.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
on top.
Yeah, that's the increase over this current year's contribution, which also it's important to add that, this year, this budget that we're in now, the 23-24, this is a 12% health insurance increase over last year. So we've got 17.25% on top of 12%.
And then next
So
year,
this
another
is
15.
compounding, it's the cumulative
Yeah.
effect of this is
I'm
quite
shopping
significant,
around for health insurance, right?
so.
For this reason.
And you do have in your packet this last, if this, just some Karen puts together each year, the year-to-year comparison, voting history, and, as well as kind of where we were in the tax levy percent increase and the tax levy, dollar amount, the voting history, whether it's passed. So, 2.9 is, we've come out with 2 years of negatives and a 0. That 0 was an error, and there's been some discussion on that. 21, 22, that's in red there. There were some changes, in business official at the time. Karen was not the business official, different superintendent. And so there, that 0 was supposed to go out at a negative, so that, there was corrections that were required to be made. And, that's how we came back with those, with some of that. That's part of the reason why have been negative increases for the past few years. And so when you look at, I would point out to the board, 2020, the black bold number, 2020, 2021. If you look at the tax levy amount, $5.2 million. So typically every year, that was the peak, right, of our tax. When you look at the previous history, that's the highest our tax levy has been. And that was for, 3 school years ago and 4 years, preceding this budget. So it's important to note that if you were seeing even small increases to the levy, we could be, the cumulative effect of that could be at least 300,000 or more to the positive. And so this is something for a variety of reasons that occurred. But so we were at 5.2 million. This tax levy here at 2.9% that we would put out to the voters is only bringing us back to $5,090,000.
We should be going up.
So we're still 200,000 short of where we will be for tax year. There is no correction. That's, no, that's,
There's no. Sorry.
and it's also why, there's no correction to that. I don't think the taxpayers would want to,
That was for 200,000 extra.
Someone.
But it is quite interesting to look at, like she's talking about the cumulative effect. when I came back, it was known that there was an error in the tax levy calculation and it was ignored. And it's very sad because we paid for it the following year and then some.
It's so important to raise prices a little bit every year, not to scare people.
So this is, our situation, and so we have some things to consider. I know it's a lot of information. But that's where we're at. So thoughts? I will tell you, as you can see, most of this is going to be necessary to get to this number, and, we have to figure out how to,
Do the best thing.
well, yes, and then how to move forward and recover from this. And so what, obviously right now, putting the budget together is the priority, but, now that we're getting some pretty, pretty good numbers that we can use in terms of our aid and those types of things. I think also Karen and I we're gonna, kind of work on that, the Forecast 5 program that we have and kind of look at projecting out because, sustainability, we have to be looking at sustainability. We're gonna get to the point where there's nowhere to get the money. If we don't take a look at this, it's important, I appreciate as hard as the topic is, but it's important to have our community and people hear and understand this so that we can figure out a way to move forward. Because a lot of small districts have sustainability issues and I don't want to get to, cutting programming is not going to bring, it's not good for our students that are here, our children, preparing them, we're talking about our, all the strategic planning, every student future ready, but also, it's not going to bring new people to our community. If we have limited programs available outside of your standard regions.
Or physical street cutting programs.
So, now, I talked a lot about, right now, we need to be in this moment and get this to balance, but we also have to be looking together and working to the future, and looking at what does that look like. And making it sustainable, not only this year, next year, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. Sustainability is a real concern, as I've talked about since when I was interviewing for this position, we have to start looking at that.
Some other options to consider, obviously, and I think that if we all have a chance to digest these numbers a little bit, we can probably bring some ideas to the table at the board meeting. But I know we've done in the past here. As you said, we've got roughly 30 kids, 30, 40 kids in each grade level. Obviously, you can't shrink one elementary class with 40 kids and it'll be the same. But if you've got 70 kids across 2 grades, could you handle three sections with one of those sections being a multi-grade classroom?
So that's something that we've talked about in the past. It's something we can look at. I think the difficulty right now with that is that we're struggling with proficiency and COVID gap and all of those things. So I think we would have to look at that and,
I would think if you
Yeah, that's
were to cross it, one day, start at the lowest grades where the COVID gap is not yet, because the COVID gap is going to be ahead of that. So if you started that with a second and third grade class next year, then you wouldn't, they haven't suffered that COVID gap.
yeah, and that's something I think we could take a look at and what that might look like.
I would much rather see something like that than a half day gap.
Yeah, I think as we're thinking about these things, if you could, shoot me an email, because then we can have some costs to, have a better discussion about.
So you mentioned, different pathways, and I'll be honest, I do not take with all of the ones that can be created. But you also mentioned the art program, so those programs that you were speaking of, are they in a pathway? Or is that just a required component for every student?
So New York State has to approve the pathway, so, and, obviously, there are some discussions of change of graduation requirements that move very slowly, and I know, Peter has brought up about the Blue Ribbon Council and really talking, the Blue Ribbon Panel and talking about, what they're looking at in changes, but currently, over the next few years, it's called Regions 4+1, so typically you have to pass the Regions and all the 4 content areas. So you're got English, math, I remembered math this time, social studies and science. And then, one additional, so, the languages are already kind of built in, so we have Spanish here, so if someone has a sequence in Spanish, then that will count. CTE, if you go out to both CTE, that will count. So what we've done is we've created this pathway, so, and then you're supposed to do pass 1 additional, so you could pass 2 in math or 2 in science, but you have to pass all 4 plus 1 additional Regents exam. So instead of passing an additional Regents exam, you can use the CTE pathway and pass. So for example, Mrs. Maxwell had 1 originally, and she expanded, as we let you know, to 3 now, 3 different pathways in the ag kind of area, in the special area of agriculture. And so they would pass, instead of a 5th Regents exam, they would pass one of her proficiency exams. So but the state requires certain curriculums or certain sequencing, and she has done all that work. And Mr. DeSoto was very close as well. So for a student who maybe doesn't necessarily care for the options at BOCES, CTE, they're getting that here. So we've built a very strong ag following. There's 1 or 2 courses that you can get a science credit for, the natural resources course, and instead of maybe taking a region science course for your 3rd science. So there are a lot of free opportunities, I think, for more CTE here, and options from kids who aren't a traditional kind of Regents test taker.
I go,
So some high achieving, if I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer or go to a 4-year school and I have other plans, these offer other options, right? So we talk a lot about, future ready is just not college anymore. Career, military, those types of things. So, there are some benefits, and I think, we've kind of been working on one at a time. The next step was art possibly, and
So that, I mean,
we could create another one.
When I look at this, and I know nothing about education, but I know business, and I know sustainability comes first, always. If you don't have sustainability, you fix it now. And I'm not saying we've got an organization, but you don't allow yourself to get pulled in different directions and other projects that aren't the primary purpose of the organization. You have to focus on the primary purpose of the organization, which is creating an excellent educational program for our kids within budget. And so I'm concerned that we could get distracted, but we really need to be sustainable at this point. We're seeing double-digit increases in health insurance again next year. It's gonna hit us again next year. You gotta start planning for that now. Can't be a surprise. No surprises. None. I hate them.
You tell the governor that.
it's hard to think of the consortium throws.
Oh my goodness, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But seriously, if we know what's happening, we have to prepare for it.
Agreed.
It's a big if.
I know.
Do you have a crystal ball?
No,
Well, and again,
but we do know it's
No, I mean, we definitely know that there's gonna be increase, we just don't know how much.
yeah, and
It's gonna be a
again,
lot.
we were told that the health insurance is gonna go up 6% last year when they gave us the 12% increase. They said it's a one-time fix, it's 12%, but next year it'll be 6.
And we're at
17 is much
17.
different than 6.
So,
Oh, we were wrong.
We have to be prepared for that.
No,
Okay.
agreed.
Right, we do.
But how do you know? I mean, they could have said it was gonna be 25%. We don't know what,
They were,
there's only so much that you can prepare for with that.
We're only allowed to hold a certain amount of them.
Right, and so, and we have struggled with that, so, you know, I think if someone looks, if you look initially at, say, if you love to read audit reports and all that, you could look at the fund balance and say, oh, you know, they end up with, but we've gotten into this cycle over the years of taking a huge portion of the fund balance and putting it to the next budget, and we're keep creeping it up, so we just were at, you know, 700,000, and now we're closer to 1 million, and, you know, between fund balance and reserves, and at some point, what happens is when we get so tight as we're gonna get, there's not opportunity to generate fund balance.
Can't reject.
Right, because you balance expenses and revenue. Fund balance comes with maybe, oh, costs were a little lower than we thought, and you kind of end up with a little money left over. But, that's getting less and less likely that that's happening. And, you know, we're in a situation where reserves are comfortably funded, but taking ERS and running it out in 3 years will become problematic. So.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? I think we're good. We'll kind of talk about, administratively and, academically, we'll kind of look at, you know, what that might look like. There are some challenges, you know, and I think we have to look at that and talk to our teachers and, the principal. There are challenges to being a grade 1 and 2 teacher. You know, the state has certain requirements, and we've got to make sure kids are there and.
I'm not saying it's gonna be easy.
Yeah, no. So I think we've got to make sure that we can do it
Yep.
and, you know, do a good job with that and serve them in those kind of combined classrooms, serve our students well. And, you know, it's something to look at. And I'm not sure, I think, what I'd also like to do is maybe look to see if there are other districts, if there are other districts out there, you know, what have they learned from them and how successful has it been?
Mhm.
So if you know of anybody, let me know.
anything that doesn't cause harm. We have to continue building confidence.
Well, we got a lot to chew on here.
So there's a lot to digest. These numbers.
I will say that if we look at doing something like that, you know, there will be additional costs associated with that in terms of professional development, preparation for teachers,
Understood.
resources, you know, like one of the things I think it's important is that we cannot ask our teachers to do things that we cannot invest in them to have the proper professional development and the resources to be effective. And so, you know, when you say, oh, well, we could get 400, we would probably have to get a little more than 400 to make sure that we can give them what they need to make those classrooms successful.
I wouldn't argue that for a second.
We have to probably take that action.
So we don't typically open up the workshops or special meetings.
Yeah.
But we will have our board meeting in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'll have to public comments there.
There are no public comments?
That workshop.
Usually called meeting with so many people here. I appreciate that you're recording this. But in terms of transparency, you at least owe everyone microphones so they can hear you. I'm disappointed that there's no public input, given the number of people who are here tonight. And I think that speaks to some of the issues that undermine your budget and the school.
So
There needs to be more active participation, more engagement. You're talking about a budget that you're accepting 2.9 tax levy as your ceiling, when the community could have an opportunity to go beyond that if they're given budget that they can support.
I'd like to go.
I'm disappointed. I came here to speak tonight. And I'm sure I'm not the only one.
I would address just so this is probably, and I know we have a few people that come on a regular basis. This is probably the largest, since I've been here in 6 years, the largest crowd we've had. We did not anticipate that. We will certainly look for a larger space, and have microphones available for that in the future. Since I've been here, this is the largest crowd that we've had.
There's an urgency here,
Right.
and you gave 20 hours notice before changing the meeting, which you called a scheduling conflict online. But then tonight called we want to have everybody be aware, and we want the transparency. Then you dropped the bomb on faculty and only gave 30 hours. And these people showed up and should be allowed to have some input. This is unreal, the amount of urgency behind this.
Ideas for you.
Yeah, seriously, you want to talk about transparency? You think they'll come back in 2 weeks? You won't even hear them tonight.
Just want to vote.
These are our children. You're talking about shutting down pre-K and going half day to kindergarten. I don't even have kids that young, and I care. This is a disgrace. You're not gonna let these people speak. Gone. You switched the meeting and claimed it was a schedule conflict, and then tonight said, I wrote it down, I can look it back up, that you wanted to have transparency with these people, that you moved it forward for the conversation. Don't lie. Which is it? Schedule conflict or transparency? I'm sorry, this is,
Excuse me. That's uncalled for. The
Excuse me?
voice and the.
you have teachers shaking in their boots right now.
The board determined that, not the superintendent. The superintendent, there was a scheduling conflict.
She
It was-
started this meeting lying to us. It was a scheduled conflict, and then
There was
we
no-
said that this
no lie.
this was open tonight for this conversation that you're now not allowing to happen.
The board. Our policy does allow that if we are to vote, we could allow public comment at this setting.
You've done it in professional terms.
I will entertain a motion to open up this session for public comment. Do I have a motion? Motion by Tom. Dina, would you please record this? Do I have- Second by Jen. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carried 5-0. Typically, we have a podium for people to come up to. So if somebody wouldn't mind coming up to this corner right here, we will allow a half an hour for public comment, which is in our policy, and we'll limit comments to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Mike Mugis. I don't know if people can hear me in the back. I recognize your budget constraints, so I'm giving you a free book tonight. You will take one and pass it back. The book is called From Once There Was a School to a School Once Here. I spoke to this group last year stating that my opinion was when you cut teachers last year, you were taking the first step towards what ultimately will become a merger out of necessity, taken out of your hands. If you are prepared to go with the budget that you're talking about tonight, you're taking a leap, not a step. Again, with this many people, the community has an opportunity for you to not let the budget drive the mission, the school, but the vision and mission drive the school. Now, included in that book is my resume. I'm not looking for a job, trust me. I'm enjoying retirement. My grandchildren go to school here. The youngest is in pre-K, the start of a 13-year odyssey through Salem. I want her to graduate from Salem High School. But you will note in that resume that I am a school improvement specialist, 36 years of award-winning principal, 5 years as a superintendent. I can appreciate the bind that Julie is in now as a former superintendent. But when the vision drives the school, not the budget, I also was a superintendent that passed a 12% budget increase beyond what our tax levy, because we had an organization that went bankrupt. They were paying pilot payment in lieu of taxes. I went on 4 consecutive Saturdays, knocked on every door in the community, gave them information, took their best shots, responded. We passed that because leaders do the right thing. Managers do things right. I was not a manager. I've talked about transparency. Microphone for people in the back, public comments. The district needs more engagement. In terms of a vision, you have one, but you don't. You have one on paper, but the staff members here, if I asked them right now without looking at their cell phones, they couldn't tell me the vision, which means you don't have one. So on May 2nd of last year, there were about 40 people convened to work with someone that I believe the district allocated $15,000 to have that person lead a school improvement. When you look at my resume, I've spoken on school improvement at national and international conventions from Miami to Los Angeles, from Washington, D.C. to Dallas. Big schools, city schools, small schools. If I had known that you wanted to invest in this, I would have done it for free. My grandkids go here. I'm sorry, I assume that's my time. Julie, this is, you and I have met 3 times. Each time you've said, Mike, I need to pick your brain. Let's have a cup of coffee. The last meeting we had was at the holiday concert in December. A year from now, I'm going to be running for this board, so maybe we'll have that cup of coffee. I just want to help. And I encourage you to recognize that 2.9 is not concrete. And I want you to do the right thing. Thank you.
That's right.
Is there anybody else who'd like to come forward?
It's horrifying for me, so just, appreciate the severity of it.
Could you just share your name?
I am Johanna Hunt. I've got kids in 4th grade and in pre-K. And one of my pre-K child also works with the special education department. I cannot fathom eliminating pre-K from the school law here. We have, like Ms. Adams noted, we have no other options for early education here. We have very limited access to Head Start programs. It's a 30-minute drive if we want to seek out any other pre-K options. Last year, during the teacher cuts, a phenomenal teacher that raised my older child's confidence beyond imagination when he had none coming out of previous grade, was cut because she was the newest hire. And I, again, appreciate budget decisions, but it can't be that black and white. It cannot be so black and white that it is the last person in is the first person to go when the budget can't be met. There has to be the tax issue. There's got to be other ways, or we will lose the best teachers we have got here. And our kids need those. Our kids need the encouraging teachers, the teachers that are excited to be here. And losing them is disheartening. People will leave the district. Talk about enrollment not going up, it will go down more. People won't want to be here. We have an amazing community, an amazing school. I mean, in 4 years, we've had 4 principals here. There's something going on. And all of us just want to see those things remedied. but we don't want to see it at the expense of the amazing educators that we already have. And that is just, you know, when you've got kids coming home and telling you how amazing the educators are, and you see it firsthand, them being on the chopping block is not the answer.
Is there anybody else who'd like to come forward and address concern with the board? Just identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Mitchell Breeze, community member. You got a daughter coming up. I'll be honest, I don't know fully what your levers are to pull, like about, you know, the tax levy and all that, like if you can raise it. I think if there is a possibility to raise more money through taxes, I know some people are against it, but I think there's a good portion of this community that's, well, there's one thing we want to fund, it's the schools, because online, I don't know how much you follow, I'm not that big on myself, but there's a lot of people talking about pulling, I think what she just alluded to, their kids out of the school. I mean, I'll do it too, like if I have to go to private school, I don't want to, but I will. So I think enrollment will drop if this is the direction we head. But I think there's another option, like maybe, you know, if there is a way to raise taxes to get money, I think people are willing. Because yeah, private school is just as expensive, so let's, you know, I think you've got some levers if that is an option. So I just wanted to say.
Thank you.
Any additional comments, concerns to share with the board?
Hi, I'm Ava. I go to school and I'm very nervous. You guys can't take away kindergarten. You guys can't take away preschool. I have a brother in 2nd grade and it's very hard to find places for younger kids. It's very hard to, like some of you said, 30-minute drive to the nearest Head Start and stuff like that. And it's not ethical. My parents they work full time. My mom works in a jail. My dad works in Albany. And I can't drive up because we don't really have enough money to get a car. That's kind of personal. Anyways, it's hard. And every time I come here and I listen to possible budget cuts, I'm more nervous that the school will cease. I know that, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard rumors that we're in pretty big debt. I'm not really sure at all, but that's kind of scary. And I don't want that. And I want people to get a really good education. So I'm really nervous. So yeah, just from a student's point of view. So. Yeah.
Here.
Anybody else? Please come forward.
Hello. I'm Shara Hunt, and I didn't know I was even planning on coming here this evening, actually. But I'm here because actually, and this young lady that got up and spoke, I just really appreciate that. And I realized that maybe I should stand up and just tell you guys that the reason why I'm actually here tonight is that because my son Jackson. So I have one child still left in school here. He's 12. He's in 7th grade. 2 children have already graduated. But I'm here tonight because he called me at work this afternoon and actually texted me and said, I need to talk to you. It is important. And literally that's on my phone. And so I called him. I said, what's going on? And he said, you might need to leave work early. I said, okay, well, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm okay. He said, but something's going on at school. And I was like, oh, and I knew there's kind of like been going on at other moms kind of keeping me like that, you know, there's been talks and things that are happening. And he said something's happening at school, and I think some teachers are hearing already that they're maybe going to be losing their jobs. And he said there's a meeting at school tonight, And he said, so I think that, are you gonna go to that meeting? And I was like, well, gosh, I'm not sure, I think, what time is it? He goes, it's at 6:00. And I said, well, you sound pretty concerned about this. And he said, well, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. And I said, well, it sounds like you would like me to go to that meeting and find out what's going on. And he said, yeah, I would like you to go. So I actually came tonight because my child called me at work and said, I think you might need to leave early so that you can go and find out what is going on at my school, because he's concerned. Because him and his friends today, like hearing like little rumors about what's going on, that our children are getting concerned about what is happening, that there are, what does it mean, what's going on, that budgets are being cut and teachers are being cut, and that, so just for us to recognize the fact that this like stresses our children and it affects them because they don't understand it in a lot of ways, you know? And so I just think it's important that we just keep that in mind, that the way that they see it and they feel it. You know, he said to me, he goes, Mom, but there's 4 new TVs in the cafeteria. Yeah. This was our conversation. And I said,
Tell you that the cafeteria runs itself.
no, and I said, what? Really? I said,
Had a conversation with the board here.
oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know who was.
No, that's okay. And I said, well, okay, well, that is interesting. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, and so I don't understand. And I said, well, I think that is something that, it's a life lesson. I said, for you to pay attention that, you know, you see things like that and it doesn't always make sense. I said, so you need to pay attention to those things and ask questions, you know? But anyway, it just made me realize that when she stood up to speak as a student, that to realize that our kids, this affects them, and it stresses them also to feel like unsettled, because he even brought up the fact that the school might go away in a few years and merge with Cambridge or with Greenwich. And we had a quick conversation on the phone, but the bottom line was he wanted me to be here. And so I left work and I came here tonight. So, anyways, so.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nisha Duvernoy. I heard you mention wanting to get more students to meet proficiency. And my question is, how are you planning to do that when you're also talking about larger class sizes and no AIS? Anything? As a parent and educator, I'd love to hear how you're gonna do that.
This is just a preliminary discussion. These are the first time that we're seeing these numbers in place. And we are trying to ourselves grapple with these numbers and the best way for us to deal with them. We had no opportunity to even talk amongst ourselves or to take a look at some of the avenues that we can explore. Can't answer that because we don't have any answers yet.
I'd like to really consider it because I don't see how that could happen.
That will be considered. We just have not had that opportunity. This is the first time we're seeing these numbers.
But you must have seen these numbers coming. It's not
Yeah.
like,
We got the numbers at 6:00 when I walked in the room.
Not this.
when it's happening year after year.
And that's part of your state government problem. We don't get these numbers until last week, earlier this week. We don't know what to plan for. When the budget's late, we're putting our budget out long
Okay, but
before.
we also need to plan for increased student needs with everything that's happening, and these needs aren't going away. So larger class sizes and eliminating AIS is something we can plan for, that we need those things.
And these are all things that will go into our conversation that we will have. We
Glad
just
to hear that.
cannot answer your question because we have not had the conversation.
Okay, I'll be looking for that answer in the future. Then. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to share or ask a comment? Share a comment?
I have a question for the community, if I might.
You have something?
Okay. Yeah.
Julie Myler.
I've had 3 kids come through the school district. If I looked at each of my 3 kids, they're totally different students, each with, unique needs and each needing what we have on the chopping block. My oldest was an academic, did great, could go anywhere. Kelsey had unique needs. She needed AIS. She needed every single specialized support she could get to graduate. And then my son Charlie needed CTE. He needed tech. He needed Miss Maxwell's programs to graduate. So if I take those my 3 kids and put them over the students that we have at the building, they're each going to need what you have on the chopping block to graduate. So please don't just eliminate something. Please try to hold on to as much as you can in those 3 areas to keep it balanced. Because if you cut out and you get rid of one of those legs on that stool, you're going to lose a chunk of kids. Because they're not one size fits all. They need all those programs to get through. So when you consider things, please don't just consider chopping off a leg of a stool. You're going to have more hurt and less graduating, and we need a high percentage of graduates as well. So.
You had a
Peter?
comment, Peter?
And I'm addressing you all as a board member, not as the school board. My question, the rhetorical question, only raise your hand, and I'm not gonna hold anybody accountable if you don't. If we decided that the right path was to say that we need a 4.9% tax increase, or whatever, a larger tax increase than what our levy would allow, which means that we have to have a super majority to get it passed. How many of you are willing to stop that person who's saying, oh, those teachers just want a huge raise at the coffee pot stewards and say, no, that's not the reason? How many of you are willing to stop somebody in the chicken barbecue line at the firehouse and say, wait, I was there that night, that's not what's happening? How many of you are willing to go back on Facebook and say, no, you're wrong? Hey.
We're all taxpayers.
I'm glad, I understand that, as am I. As am I. My question,
Go ahead and finish.
So I just want to say, it's the right question, and part of the right question. I think the thing is, what you need to do is put together the budget that you hope would pass. And then start asking people that question. Will you support this and will you vote for it? If not, why not? And then look at how you can address that. This whole budgeting gap is impossible to get, first of all. So thank you because you were undertaking it. You undertake it every year, quietly do it with no one ever showing up. And now it's hard. And it's just gotten a lot, really. The truth is, you need to look at that. This is what our budget should be, and this is what we should be asking the taxpayers for. And then you need to say, is there any chance that can pass? Because maybe it can't. If it can't, that's silly. You need to find a number where it can. And then you need to be prepared with whatever that number is you end up at, that it might not pass. And so what is our backup plan when that budget fails? And that's a whole nother budgeting process you need to go through. And then even that one may fail. And so you got to be ready with a contingency budget below that. So you really got to make 3 budgets. And I don't think there's any way around that. But then you got to make that budget. You got to go to people. You've got to tell them, will you support this? And will you talk to people at Stewart's Hat, or will you help us get the word out on it? Because that's the chance you have to make it pass. And to me, the best way you do that is, I think in Julie's email this morning to the community, she mentioned something about everybody coming together. Is that everybody comes together. And that means, yes, the taxpayers need to come and be willing to support the budget. The teachers need to be willing to look at maybe something that needs to be done on their end. The administration needs to look at maybe things that need to be done on their end. The staff, everybody needs to be willing to say, I'll take a little bit of pain to make this school still what it should be for our kids. And if we at least take that chance and give the voters that opportunity before we give up on it and say, we got to live within the tax cap, at least give them the chance. Give the voters the chance.
And if the voters say no, then it really wasn't on you guys. You guys didn't decide not to do it. The voters decided not to do it. And it's the community school. So if the community decides they don't want to do it, that's the community's choice. But please, please take the time to consider a number above that that makes the school what we think it should be.
That's what. Who takes the hill? That's what.
Majority vote two.
Hmm?
This is the majority vote two.
No, it's 60%.
2%.
Oh, if we go
A few
up.
more minutes of the public comment session. Is there anybody who would like to add an additional comment to the board? Well, is there anybody else? I know you've already.
There was one thing I forgot to mention where nobody else wanted to speak.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Did you want to add something else?
If I may, it's for you. I said to piggyback on one of the comments, and I can't remember who made it, with the children being so different. Like I mentioned before, I have a pre-K kid and a fourth grader. A fourth grader who is enamored by mathematics and, I mean, just eats it up. And I can see being an academic type long-term. My 4-year-old, however, is so smart, but would probably love the ag program we offer here. And I know that you mentioned that was a possibility, to bring in some, to help, balance the budget. We are a long way from that, from being involved in the ag program here, age-wise. But we are an ag-based community. And I mean, with incredibly big, incredibly well-run dairy farms, we have, I mean, that seems so nonsensical. And I understand that there has to be some budget balancing somewhere, but for an ag-based community to remove the amazing ag program that's been built here seems, and yes, I can see one of my kids going that route. He will not stop talking about tractors and big machinery, right? The other one couldn't care less. But that seems like such a fundamental need in this community where we have many, many kids who want to come back to this community and be here and run their family farms or be first generation farmers here. And that is what this community has been based on for a long time, is ag. And hearing that is on the chopping block, it wasn't first in my mind because I don't have kids old enough to be taking part of that yet. But that seems like really just not the best decision for an ag program. That would be my biggest thing to consider. I mean, for an ag community like this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is why it's so bad tonight, let's have a workshop.
There is no one else, and I would like to close the public comment session and almost half an hour.
I'd just like to add that, there's a lot of, I think we've had some good feedback. It's giving us a lot to think about. Obviously, this is our first look, and this is creating conversations, which I think is a good thing. As you're thinking about this, please feel free to email myself or the board with your thoughts or ideas. We will have the public comment at the next board meeting, but it gives us the opportunity, if there maybe are some viable options, we can put costs to that. And it really helps move the conversation along.
Anything else to add to your privileges? Anybody else questions?
Thank everybody for coming.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.